Death, it's coming for you. Board the barge, your mom's here too in death. When your honor's a loss, on you'll float. Blood red waters you'll cross, the death boat. It's pulling up to the fiery gate, the death boat. To save your soul, it's too fucking late. Rowing on toward damnation as torment awaits you soon. And death, the fate you did earn. From this moment on, it's a good day to burn. It's hell. Welcome to Klingon hell. Welcome to hell. It's hell, hell, hell. Woo! This is a review of the Star Trek Voyager episode Barge of the Dead. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know if the chief engineer of the ship goes to hell, be warned, spoilers beyond this point. Have you ever wondered where Klingons go when they die? Have you ever hoped the writers of Star Trek Voyager would solve that mystery for you? Me neither, but they did. So let's talk about it. We open on B'Elanna having a rough shuttle flight. Apparently, she was out chasing a probe and she ran into an ion storm. She crash lands in the shuttle bay, and Tom Paris, acting as field medic, rushes in to make sure she's okay. He diagnoses her with a mild concussion, but that's all. Cut to the ready room, where Janeway is pissed that B'Elanna risked her life to save a probe. B'Elanna's like, it was the only one of those probes we had. I didn't want to lose it. Janeway's like, hey, come on, the fact that we have limited resources has barely mattered up until now, so fuck it. Besides, I'm more concerned about the possibility of losing you, Lana. Did you just call me Lana? That's your name, right? Lana Turner? B'Elanna Torres. Oh, shit, for real? This whole time your name hasn't been Lana Turner? No wonder you looked at me funny when I said if you married Tom Paris, he'd be husband number 8. Yeah, I had no idea what you were talking about. I figured you were just having another one of your episodes, like when you murdered Tuvix or tried to make friends with the Borg. Anyway, Lana is apparently what B'Elanna's mother used to call her. That kind of freaks B'Elanna out. She goes back to her quarters, and Chakotay drops in to show her this piece of metal they found embedded in her shuttlecraft. It's from the Alpha Quadrant, and it has a Klingon symbol carved into it. How it got to this part of the galaxy is a total mystery. Chakotay's like, here, you keep it as a souvenir. It's of absolutely no scientific interest to us. B'Elanna puts the piece of metal on a table, turns away for a second, and when she turns back, there's blood gushing from the carving of the Klingon symbol. Then she hears echoes of screaming voices. Then the blood vanishes, and the voices fall silent. Was it not supposed to do that? I just assumed all materials manufactured by the Klingon Empire were designed to occasionally bleed and emit disembodied screams. In fact, I still assume that. B'Elanna takes the piece of metal to engineering and forces Harry Kim to stay up late running tests on it. He can't find anything unusual about it and finds no traces of blood and no reason why it might have caused B'Elanna to hear screams. Harry's like, it's 0300. Why don't we go to bed and come back and examine this thing more in the morning? Then Neelix walks in, wired as fuck at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he is super interested in this Klingon artifact. He's so interested that he wants to throw a party about it. And he wants B'Elanna to give a speech. Deciding to heed the advice of the great Johnny Cash and meditate on it, B'Elanna goes to Tuvok's quarters where they light candles and sit quietly for a bit. Tuvok's like, you know what the problem is? You're self-loathing. You hate being Klingon, and your hallucination of the blood and the screams coming from that artifact is just a psychological manifestation of that. You'll always be Klingon. It's a part of who you are. You need to get over it. Here, I know what will help. And Tuvok goes and gets his batleth and starts waving it around like a dork, and eventually he swipes it in front of B'Elanna and cuts her on the cheek. She's like, "Hey, what the hell?" And Tuvok's like, "Oh, go cry about it, you big baby. Wah, wah, my superior officer and the ship's head of security just cut me on the face with a sword for no reason. Wah, get out." Cut to the party. The Doctor and Seven are singing a Klingon drinking song. Everybody is pretending to drink out of tankards with stickers of Klingon symbols on them. Neelix has replicated Gog. B'Elanna's like, "Christ, my mother would have loved this. She was all about this Klingon bullshit." Yeah, but wasn't she Klingon? She was, but at some point don't you have to give it a rest? Janeway steps forward to give a speech, but as she's giving the speech, she starts to talk very slowly. Then the lighting changes. The room gets dark and red, and two Klingon dudes appear out of nowhere with swords and kill everyone. They attack B'Elanna last of all, and she falls, and the next instant finds herself on the deck of a wooden ship. A Klingon grabs her, and another tries to brand her, but the brand doesn't leave a mark. The Klingon is like, "I need to talk to my supervisor about this," and they sit her down on the deck next to another Klingon guy who explains that this is the Barge of the Dead, which takes the souls of the dishonored dead to Klingon hell. B'Elanna's like, "But I'm not dead. I was just on my ship at a terrible party." The Klingon guy says, "That wasn't your actual life. That was the dream before dying, the illusion of life we create because we can't yet accept that we're dead. Did you go to Sunday school?" One of the Klingon guards comes back and drags B'Elanna up to their boss, the guy who's steering the ship. He's like, "Hi, I'm Kortar, the first Klingon who destroyed the gods and was punished by being condemned to ferry the souls of the dishonored to Klingon hell. You're B'Elanna Torres. You're not supposed to be here yet." B'Elanna's like, "Great, because I don't believe in you anyway." Kortar says, "If you didn't believe, you wouldn't be here." B'Elanna grabs a nearby batleth and makes a move on Kortar, but he's like, "First, you can't kill me. I'm already dead. Second, did you forget the part where I single-handedly slaughtered the gods? What are you thinking?" He snatches the batleth from her, cutting her hand as he pulls it away. Just then, another condemned soul arrives on the boat, and it's Miral, B'Elanna's mom. What are the odds? Cut to sickbay, where B'Elanna suddenly wakes up, alive and well, apparently. The Doctor and Tom are there, and they explain that she was rescued from her shuttlecraft, which was drifting after encountering an ion storm. Everything she's experienced in the episode up until now was just a dream. But if it was just a dream, why does she still have this cut on her hand from when Kortar snatched the batleth? The Doctor's like, "I don't know, people get cuts, relax," and he heals it for her. Later, B'Elanna's in her quarters. Chakotay drops by to see how she's feeling. She says, "I think I died, and I was on the Barge of the Dead, and my mom was there too." Chakotay's like, "First time learning you have a close relative in hell, huh? Well, I can't promise it ever gets any easier, but it does get funnier the more times it happens." Chakotay encourages B'Elanna to treat her experience on the Barge of the Dead as symbolic, her subconscious trying to tell her something. B'Elanna's like, "Nah, I'm gonna treat it as a literal reality where my mother is being ferried to everlasting damnation and I've got to rescue her." She reads the Klingon Bible and learns about a story of Kahless descending to the underworld to rescue his brother and decides that's what she needs to do for her mother. She goes to Captain Janeway and says, "Okay, so I want the Doctor to recreate the conditions of the ion storm artificially in sickbay so that I'll have another near-death experience and return to the Barge of the Dead and I can save my mom. What do you say, Cap?" Janeway's like, "There's only so far I'll go to accommodate religious practices on this ship. If you wanted to sacrifice a child, I wouldn't allow that either." B'Elanna's like, "Yeah, well, wait until you meet Icheb. We'll see if you're singing the same tune." So they do the thing in sickbay where they almost kill B'Elanna on purpose, and she passes out and wakes up back on the Barge of the Dead. She goes below and finds her mom, and her mom's like, "What are you doing here? Also, this is your fault I'm here. I'm being punished for the dishonor of you walking away from your Klingon heritage." B'Elanna's like, "You tried to force me to become a Klingon warrior, which is what made me walk away from the Klingon stuff in the first place, so it's your fault that this is my fault." There's a transference ritual they can perform that will allow the spirit of B'Elanna's mom to escape Klingon hell, with B'Elanna taking on her dishonor. Her mom is like, "You're going to take my place?" B'Elanna says, "Oh, no. After we perform the transference and your spirit has left the barge, my crew back on my spaceship is going to resuscitate me, and I'll be out of here too." I should have known you wouldn't actually go to hell for me. The guards come and take B'Elanna and her mom to see Kortar again. B'Elanna says, "I want to take my mom's place. Release her to Klingon heaven." B'Elanna's mom is like, "No," and Kortar's like, "Hey, shut the fuck up." He turns to B'Elanna and says, "You realize, of course, that if you do this, it's for real, and your friends back in the living world, who I know about because I'm fucking Kortar, won't be able to help you. Is this what you want?" B'Elanna says yes. The brand on her mother's cheek vanishes and appears on B'Elanna's cheek instead. Her mom is like, "No, I won't abandon my daughter," but Kortar's like, "Fuck off," and B'Elanna's mom disappears. The barge of the dead pulls up to the gates of Klingon hell. They lower the gangplank. Trepidatiously, B'Elanna begins to walk out. She turns back to the barge and sees Tuvok standing there holding a bat'leth. He steps forward and strikes her, and she falls and wakes up the next instant in the upside-down version of sickbay, with the doctor and Neelix standing close by. The doctor says, "Welcome to the afterlife." B'Elanna's like, "Neelix? Oh shit, this really is hell." Neelix gives B'Elanna a tour of Klingon hell, which for her is apparently Voyager. Neelix tells her, "If you thought the prospect of spending 50 years aboard this ship was bad, try eternity." Eternity aboard Voyager? Whose hell is this, B'Elanna's or mine? They go to the mess hall where the rest of the crew is waiting. They all take turns shit-talking B'Elanna. Janeway's like, "You have no glory to celebrate." And Seven's like, "I tried to help you in engineering, but you didn't want me to." And Harry's like, "You never let any of us get close to you, even Tom, who you claim to love." And Tom's like, "Yeah." Tuvok, who is apparently the designated transition guy, steps up with that bat'leth again, and suddenly B'Elanna is back on the barge of the dead. She sees a woman in a Starfleet uniform in the shadows, and she's like, "Captain?" But it's not Janeway, it's her mom. Her mom says, "You can't free me until you free yourself, B'Elanna. Choose to live." Her crewmates surround her again. She takes the bat'leth from Tuvok and starts waving it around at everybody, demanding to know what they want from her. "Tell me what you want me to be. A good Klingon? A good Starfleet officer? A good Maquis? Lover?" Why didn't you say good lover? Shut up! B'Elanna's mom says, "We don't want anything from you." Janeway pipes up with, "We just want you." B'Elanna says, "I'm so tired of fighting," and she flings the bat'leth into the sea. Her mom says, "You've taken the first step on your journey." B'Elanna's like, "First step? It's season 6. B'Elanna asks if she'll see her mother again in Klingon heaven. Her mom says, "Maybe. Or maybe when you get home." B'Elanna wakes up in sickbay. She says, "Oh God, I'm alive," and hugs Captain Janeway. Aww. The end. An okay episode that feels like it should have been a lot better. Barge of the Dead centers on a character who, in principle, should be one of the most inherently interesting members of the Voyager crew. On paper, B'Elanna Torres looks like the quintessential Star Trek character, a person of mixed heritage, with a troubled history relating to Starfleet, whose technical competence and stubborn determination to do what she thinks is right, no matter what anyone else thinks, makes her an indispensable member of the team. I know I've made this point about her before, but it bears repeating. There's so much conflict written into her character from the beginning. Half Klingon, half human, chief engineer of a Starfleet ship who until recently was a member of a terrorist group that had taken up arms against Starfleet, a naturally mistrustful loner forced by circumstances to become a team player and rely on her crewmates. The deck is so stacked in favor of her being the most interesting character on this show, and instead, she's just one of the gang. The problem with B'Elanna is the same problem that afflicts the rest of the cast and the show itself. Potentially interesting developments are introduced and then not followed up on, or followed up on in such a belated, half-assed fashion that they might as well have just been forgotten. It happens throughout the series, and it happens in this episode. Here's an example. A small detail, I admit, but a telling one. When B'Elanna meets with Janeway after crash landing the shuttle, Janeway calls her Lana, which we've never heard Janeway call her before, and which is significant because B'Elanna's mother calls her Lana. Then we actually meet B'Elanna's mother, who interacts with B'Elanna in multiple scenes and never once calls her Lana. Why would you do that? Or not do that, I guess. As a writer, why would you introduce that B'Elanna's mother calls her Lana, then bring her mother in as a character in a story where the emotional stakes are inextricably tied to their relationship, and then not have the mother ever call her Lana? It just does not make sense to me. It's a little thing, I realize, and it has no bearing on the plot, but to me, it's an example of how careless the writing is on this show. Something is established that seems like it's going to be important for the lead character of the episode, and then it's just completely forgotten about. There's also the opposite problem. Things come up late in the episode that feel like they're supposed to be important for the lead character that have never been brought up in the episode before that point. When B'Elanna is surrounded by her friends on the barge and she's holding the bat'leth and going from person to person saying, "What do you want me to be?" That should be the emotional climax of the episode. I think the creators of the episode thought it was. The problem is, none of the stuff B'Elanna says is stuff the episode has been about up to this point. B'Elanna's concern for the episode has been saving her mother from Klingon hell. She feels responsible for her mother's damnation because Klingon theology, in expectedly fucked up fashion, holds parents responsible for the sins of their children. And B'Elanna's renouncing of the traditional Klingon ways is being taken out on her mother. The episode is about B'Elanna and her mom. The conflict B'Elanna feels regarding her identity is tied specifically to her mother forcing Klingon beliefs and practices on her when she was young, her mother's Klingon ways driving B'Elanna's father away. It all comes from B'Elanna and her mom. So why, in that big emotional climax at the end, does B'Elanna spend most of that time reacting to things that haven't come into play at all? She says, "What am I supposed to be? A good Starfleet officer? A good Maquis?" Her conflict about joining Starfleet after joining the Maquis wasn't a part of this episode at all, and hasn't been part of the series for years by this point. She turns to Tom and says, "Lover?" Her relationship with Tom is barely even present in this episode. Then she turns to her mom and says, "Daughter?" It's just another item on the list. Now, here's the thing. If the writers of this episode wanted to both write a story about B'Elanna's complicated feelings about her mother and have the culmination of that story be a scene where B'Elanna lashes out at the entire crew because she feels like she's never been able to be what they want her to be, there are ways to do that, which would have worked. There are ways to keep B'Elanna's relationship with her mom centered, but also bring that other stuff in so that all of it pays off at the end. The episode just doesn't do any of those things. For example, B'Elanna clearly sees Janeway as a mother figure in this episode. Janeway calls her Lana. Janeway is the person she hugs at the end when she wakes up, grateful to be alive. Her mother is wearing Janeway's uniform during the final Barge of the Dead sequence. But there's nothing between those moments in the episode to tie it all together, to establish a meaningful connection between B'Elanna and her mom and Janeway. It's just stuff that happens. Also, I have to say, I'm pretty disappointed in Kortar. As someone who loves Klingons and loves big, over-the-top, goofy Klingon shit, I was hoping for more from the first Klingon ever, who killed the gods that made him and is now cursed to be the boatman of the damned for all eternity. He's way too laid back for my taste. Shit, the nameless guards who drag B'Elanna and her mom around on the barge have more personality than Kortar does. Come on, man! You drive the ferry to hell! Show me some fire! The episode isn't a total loss. The script does a few things very well. In fact, I like the subtle cues early on that something isn't right with what B'Elanna is experiencing, like Tuvok's reckless behavior with the bat'leth and his cold reaction after he cuts her. I also like how they consistently stick with Tuvok as the character who triggers B'Elanna's transition from one setting to another. Tuvok feels like a random choice to be that character, but at least it adds some consistency. As is usually the case with Voyager, the acting is good, despite the shortcomings of the script. I feel kind of bad for Roxanne Dawson. This one should have been a showcase for her as B'Elanna, and it falls flat through no fault of hers. That moment at the end when B'Elanna finally accepts that her mother and her friends love her for who she is, and she throws the bat'leth away, should have been a powerful catharsis, a defining moment for her character, a moving and emotional thing. But it's not. At least for me it's not, because the episode doesn't do what it needs to do leading up to that moment to make it feel earned. It's just B'Elanna saying situationally appropriate, B'Elanna-like things. It's just something that happens. Barge of the Dead was written by Brian Fuller from a story by Fuller and Ronald D. Moore. This was the second and last Voyager episode Ronald D. Moore ever contributed to before quitting the show in sheer frustration over how fucking pointless it was. I did something similar as a viewer after a certain point. The episode was directed by Mike Vehar, one of the great television directors of the 1980s and 90s, who directed a bunch on Magnum P.I. and MacGyver and Babylon 5, among many other shows, and directed episodes of Deep Space Nine and Enterprise, as well as 12 episodes of Voyager in addition to this one. Vehar was known as a go-to guy for episodes that called for a darker look, and he lives up to that reputation here. The late scenes that take place in the Klingon Hell version of Voyager stand out in particular, with Vehar using not only lighting, but also camera angles and movement to imbue the ordinary sets with an otherworldly quality. This episode feels like a Ronald D. Moore story. Unfortunately, it also feels like a typical Star Trek Voyager story. Moore's brief time as a writer on Voyager came following his years working on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, a show which excelled at meaningful, long-term character development. Barge of the Dead is written to be an important turning point in the long-term character development of B'Elanna. Unfortunately, like most of the Voyager crew, B'Elanna never really had that. This episode tries to make up for that by having B'Elanna confront issues she's theoretically been dealing with all along, but it doesn't really work. Unlike B'Elanna's attempts to escape the Barge of the Dead, this effort is doomed to fail. It's just too late. Those are my thoughts on Barge of the Dead. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. Please join me next week as I conclude this batch of reviews of Klingon-centered episodes with a double dose of Star Trek Enterprise. That's right. How could I do a batch of Klingon episodes and possibly avoid this two-parter from Season 4 of Enterprise? Affliction and Divergence. See you next time for that one. Those ones. Whatever. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.